welcome to Groovecast, the podcast for the rhythm section with me, Ashley Walker.
And me, Charlie Smith.
And it's been a long time, hasn't it, Charlie, since we last recorded? It feels good to be back.
It does. It's been a while.
Yeah, and we've sort of been coming up with different ideas for stuff we can talk about. I know this one's sort of your brainchild.
Yeah, we've kind of done the top three thing a bit already. And it was a case of how many different ways can we shoehorn top threes into Groovecast episodes, because it's something we very much enjoy doing. And I can't remember where the idea came from, but it was about taking a particular artist who's done a lot, of which there are many, and then picking 3 songs each that fit certain categories. So in the sort of categories that when we discussed it, we narrowed it down to was the obvious one, so something that was probably a big hit or very successful, or is a song that you probably associate with that artist or whoever, producer, songwriter, musician, session player, whatever. The groovy one, which is one that we just like because it has a great groove or a great feel or is just irresistible to talk about on a groove podcast. And the last one is the deep cut, so something that might not be as well known, but that we think is worth listening to or worth seeking out. So I think they were the 3 that we settled on, and then we had the lovely job of selecting an artist to trial this with. So we thought we'd pick someone who's had a pretty decent career. It must be said, and someone we both listen to probably quite a lot, which is Paul McCartney. We've sort of avoided Beatles stuff because we'll probably do that in another episode on this format, because there's enough Beatles stuff to probably last us a whole series of episodes. We could probably do this with every single album and still pick different things. So we've just kept solo McCartney stuff, collaborations that he might have done, and Wings era stuff when he was sort of still him solo with a couple of extra people around him. Yeah, so I think that's the kind of we're looking at McCartney from about 1971 onwards.
Yeah,
I think that's probably about fair to say.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Yeah. Anyway, let's dive in. I think we'll start with the obvious ones, because they're probably going to be the ones that we've probably got less to talk about with, but it's still they still are on the list for a reason. So I'll throw over to you to reveal your first pick.
Yeah, I was kind of split on this one between Live and Let Die, which is probably my favourite James Bond theme, and I think one of McCartney's best sort of post-Beatles stuff. I was split between that and the one I've gone for, which is Maybe I'm Amazed, which I think is a really lovely song. And then listening to it, it's one of the songs I listen to and have on my playlist from his live shows. I think it's a really good song as well, and it's got great playing on it from him on piano, obviously. I love the live versions of it that he still has it in his set to this day, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
I love the when they do it live, that little outro section, which I think goes to like B flat. I think it just takes it to another level and lifts it. And the first time I heard the sort of live version of it was actually Norah Jones and Dave Grohl doing it on the Kennedy Center tribute to McCartney. And so that's a really cool version, which you can check out on YouTube, of those two. Chalk and cheese vocally, I think. But both suit it really well. And I think this was on his first album, wasn't it? On McCartney.
It was, yeah, it was on McCartney.
Yeah, so obviously Paul McCartney played all the instruments on that. Like bass, guitar, piano, organ, and then I think the only other person on it was Linda McCartney singing some backing vocals. So just to have him, and drums, of course. just to have him doing all those instruments is an achievement in itself. And yeah, it's just a really cool track. I love it. It's one of my favourite McCartney solo songs, and it's an obvious McCartney song, so that's the one I went for.
Absolutely. I think it was probably his first big post-Beatles hit.
Yeah.
Or at least it was around that time. Because it was probably, what, 71, 72-ish?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think, because I know Wings sort of came around quickly after that, which leads us quite nicely into my first pick. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I think he wrote it kind of as the Beatles were ending, so
yeah,
I think that's about right.
Yeah, and obviously I suspect written about Linda.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, on to my first pick, which was Band on the Run, which obviously from the Wings album of the same name, which was about 1973, I think, without looking at my my crib sheets too much. But yeah, I mean, what is there to say about Band on the Run? It's like it's a 3-song medley. It's very sort of reminiscent of what they did on Abbey Road, of just shoehorning songs together. And in this case, it really works. It sort of starts as that slow groove with the organ fills. Then it goes into more of a sort of a rock funk vibe, and then you get that really big dramatic sort of unison run up the scale, and then out into this almost Eagles-like acoustic guitar sort of driven tune, and then a bit of slide guitar on the solo, which always is. I love a really nice slide solo. I think it just can lift a song. Obviously we've just heard a lot of that on the on Now and Then, which they just put out recently as we're recording this. So yeah, things that was sort of a real favourite track, and I think as much like his solo stuff, it's pretty much him on all of it, with Linda doing some organ and some backing vocals, and then Denny Lane, who's not long passed away, who was playing guitar on it and some BVs. So yeah, it's pretty much just the three of them did that. I think they did the whole album together. But yeah, it's funny that when I actually look at it, 2 of my picks are from that Band on the Run album. It just shows the quality of stuff he was putting out at that time in the early 70s was just. I mean, it was still pretty much Beatles level. Yeah, I can't help but when you say with all the picks we've gone for, certainly these sort of ones from that 70s. Late 70s, early 80s kind of period, they're all very of the time, and like you were saying with this, it's almost kind of prog rocky vibes with the different sections, and you can't help when it goes into that sort of funky rocky section. You can't help but sort of bob your head to it, and it's like it really grooves, and it is, and when they do it live as well with his current band who he's had for 25, 30 years, it just sounds really fat. It sounds as close to the album as you're gonna get, but with it still having that sort of raw, in the moment feel about it, which is really cool. And so yeah, it's definitely, it was. I mean, I always loved that song, and then obviously hearing it on some of the live albums, seeing them do it live a couple of times, it's like you've got the advantage in that field of you've probably seen a lot of these songs live. Him doing
a
lot of them, yeah. Obviously, maybe I'm amazed it's been, as you said, in the set list for pretty much consistently. Band on the Run, same, and I think both of my other picks he's done at least on one of the occasions that I've seen him.
I think it's worth saying as well that. What I was thinking with Maybe I'm Amazed and with Band on the Run, and certainly with I wrote about one of my other picks, is it's all and to this day, really strong vocal performances, and the versatility in his range and everything in all of these songs. Maybe I'm Amazed, Band on the Run, how ridiculously high he gets, and having that, like, he has that real rocker gritty voice when he wants it, and then all the screaming high falsetto stuff, and still does all these tunes to this day, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he can still sing a great ballad as well. It's just that total versatility, and being able to do that while playing bass or playing guitar or playing mandolin or playing piano. It doesn't really matter what he's doing. He's still sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get on to groovy ones. So this is a bit more of a specific Groovecast pick.
Yeah.
So let's throw it over to yours and see what you went for.
Yeah. Well, listen. Sort of trying to find this one. There's quite a few of his sort of solo and wing stuff that I've got into recently, and kind of surprised at sort of this different, as we were saying, the versatility and sort of the range of music in it, and you have like disco-y feel songs and funky ones, and one of the ones we've had sort of on that track of the week thing we did, I think you talked about one of them. You might be talking about it later on, and so there's a lot of those. So I was thinking of those, and then I was trying to think of something not too obvious, and I remembered the album Tug of War, which was the first McCartney solo album I ever got quite a while ago, and this track was on there called What's That You're Doing, and it features Stevie Wonder, which is a good start for a funky track. And once again, it's very of its era. It's kind of got that late 70s, early 80s synth sounds in there. I'm pretty sure the actual track came about just sort of through a jam, and the main riff in that song, which is kind of being played by the bass and the guitar and the synths. Again, I think like these other tracks we've been talking about, it doesn't feature many people on it other than McCartney playing bass, drums, guitar, vocal. I think he might be playing synth on it as well. Stevie Wonder plays synth on it, and then he has his one of his guitarists and guys at the time, Eric Stewart, playing guitar and backing vocals. I think this whole album was kind of produced as well with the help of George Martin, so there's some real Beatlesy sounding stuff on there. But yeah, this was like one of my favourite tracks on the album when I listened to it like all those years ago. And I love at the end of it, you can tell it's kind of built on a jam, but at the end of it, when they're kind of just going round and round and they're singing, it's almost just testing different ideas, and you've got Stevie Wonder sings the She Loves You line, a real Beatles throwback. I remember when I first heard it being like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I'm with you, and I think for me, it's a shame that Ebony and Ivory was the more successful collaboration with the two of them, because I prefer What's That You're Doing personally. I think it's a more interesting song. Obviously, Ebony and Ivory, great song, and probably way more commercial.
Yeah, but also like quite controversial, really. People, I remember reading about McCartney. I think that's where I learned that this was kind of from a jam, was at the time when that song came out. It's one of the most popular duets of that century, but it's also one of the most hated by people as well. They just hate it, that it's like this thing of friendship and miserable people.
Yeah, it is. It's a weird one, but I for me, on the grounds of the song itself, I think What's That You're Doing's got more about it. It's a bit more sort of just raw and letting their personalities come through in it, and just doing something a bit different, which is kind of nice to hear, especially from both of them, sticking them in the same room and just seeing what happens. And you, as you say, you can hear that sort of spontaneous, sort of vibey sound just coming through.
Yeah, I think as well from that era, I was kind of I was always going to pick this one, but you could also go groovy ones, kind of the collaborations he did with Michael Jackson on The Girl Is Mine and Say Say Say. I think are both cool tracks, and again, sort of same thing. Hearing those two put their own spin on those tracks, but yeah, that was my groovy one. What about yourself?
So as you sort of referenced before, we did the little track of the week series while we were off the air, so to speak. And this was one of my picks for that as well, just because I think it's such an underrated Wings era song, and it's off the Venus and Mars album, I think. No, it's not. It's off Band on the Run. No, I'm going to backtrack on that. I didn't pick this as a track of the week. I picked the other one, which is from Venus and Mars, as track of the week, but this was my second pick, which I didn't use then, but I'm going to use now. But both of them, the song I was referencing off Venus and Mars is Letting Go, which is a great song, and worth listening to as an extra little bonus pick. But the one that I went for just on groove alone was Let Me Roll It, which is another one that's again been a pretty much a mainstay of his live set. And I just like it's got a really different feel from anything that he's done, sort of that sort of era, which is it's sort of bluesy, 12/8, pretty lazy, and that whole intro is just organ, bass, and drums, and the bass is playing the melody. That's sort of the driving melody in all of that sort of lazy, swirly organ and the sort of the laid back drums. And it's really high in the mix, and I quite like that. That it's just that, I mean, McCartney's a bass player, as much as anything else, and it's great to hear him playing really great bass line, and it coming through and being the star of that part of the song before anything else comes in, and then obviously you get that little funky guitar riff that comes in and recurs throughout pretty much the rest of the song, which just sits nice because it's not one of those riffs that's just constant over and over again. It just pops in every now and again and just it's like it just reminds you that it's there. But so it was this was off Band on the Run. So again, same personnel as we talked about before. Linda McCartney on organ and BVs, Denny Lane on guitar and BVs, Paul McCartney on pretty much everything else. And it's funny when I was reading up about it how much the vocal track on that is compared to John Lennon, because it's got that sort of tape echo. It's sort of a very Lennon sound, which I think even Paul McCartney said it was very, even though it wasn't intentional to be a sort of a pastiche of a Lennon track, that's what it sort of ended up being. But yeah, I just really like the feel of it. I think it's you're hearing a Beatle doing the blues, which is kind of odd, but it works.
Is this I think when he does it live, is this the one where he does the sort of tribute to Jimi Hendrix at the end of it?
I think he does sometimes, yeah. He'll put
he does that little solo section at the end.
But yeah, I mean, just again, when you watch the band doing it live now, the amount of space Abe Laboriel Jr. is leaving is, he's just got his arms in the air for what feels like an eternity, but just lands it so well. There was a version I came across, which I don't think I'd seen before, of them doing it on Jules Holland years and years and years ago. And it's just it's so laid back. It's so not busy in any way, and it's just letting the song happen. And that was one of the things I just really liked about it. And it's just the guitar is almost taking a back seat and letting the bass do most of the work, which I'm sure is something you'll be a fan of as a bass player.
Yeah, it's certainly one of those tracks I always turn up when I watch when you see his live shows, when he did it at Glastonbury, and as you say, a really great groove on it, and and thinking about it, it is very different from the other stuff he does. It's yeah, it is very unique in that feel, that real laid back thing.
Yeah, you don't hear
yeah.
many Paul McCartney songs in 12/8, do you?
No.
I can't really think of many off the top of my head.
Lucy 12/8 tunes.
That's
Yeah.
the one. But yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
and when he does do it live as well, that it does have that 60s. You can definitely, I understand what you're saying with the Lennon thing, and the actual, like, when he does it live, does sound very sort of 60s Beatles.
yeah, it's very sort of Beatlesy in that way. It's, you know, when they were, especially towards when they were starting to get into like the Let It Be album, and they were really getting into their blues with, you know, with Billy Preston and stuff influencing.
Yeah.
It sort of is a bit of a hark back to some of the stuff on there for me. It sort of has that sort of raw, raucous sound to it, which I kind of like.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, so my the last one was sort of the deep cut, and this one was probably the easiest one for me to pick, because this track's one I'd never heard of till I think this year, maybe earlier this year. It's off his Flaming Pie album, and I think the way I sort of heard it was it came up on YouTube as a recommended thing to watch, and it's a track called Beautiful Night, and you should absolutely watch the video on YouTube of them making the track. You can see it with you know, and it features it's a real hark back to the Beatles, I think, and yeah, I just love the fact, and researching it, how many Beatles people were on it. I knew obviously Ringo Starr's on it on drums, percussion, and backing vocals, and then at the end he kind of takes the lead on it. You've got McCartney, of course. George Martin did the string arrangements for it, and he's in the little video of the making of it. And then you've got Jeff Emerick as the audio engineer, who was the Beatles engineer through all the 60s. So yeah, big throwback. And then you've got Jeff Lynne in the mix, which we both love Jeff Lynne, I think. And yeah, he's sort of co-producing it. He plays guitar on it, backing vocals, and you don't. There was sort of, I think, a bit of controversy at the time, or some people who didn't like Jeff Lynne. Kind of, some people didn't like him being involved in that "Free as a Bird" and "Real Love," those singles from the Beatles. They thought he put too much of his stamp on it. And then with the Flaming Pie stuff, which he produced as well, some people just seem to be obsessed with saying it just sounds like ELO. This track doesn't sound like ELO at all to me, but there is definitely a. I think once I knew it was him producing it and playing guitar on it, there is something in some of those guitar riffs that I can hear is him. And in the making of this single, well, not single, the making of this track, in the video, you can see him and McCartney working on it and in his home studio. And yeah, it's just a really nice song. I love the verses and stuff. I think have some really nice chords in it. You can see McCartney playing piano on it in the video. And then at the end, you've got a real sort of. I thought it made me think of "In the End," off of Abbey Road, that section where they're trading off guitar solos in the sort of outro coda section, if you like, of this song. It goes into a real 60s feel. Ringo taking the lead, McCartney singing harmony, and then he's doing some solos over the top, which could so easily be the three of them, George, John, and Paul, trading off on it. And yeah, I just think it's a really great track, and one that I don't know. I think it got to 25 in the charts at the time, something like that. So it's probably one most people wouldn't know. He doesn't do it live. It's a great vocal performance once again on it, and a real catchy chorus as well, I think. So yeah, I love it. Love this track.
Yeah, and it's funny you should bring that up, because my pick is also from the Flaming Pie album. My deep cut pick. It isn't the same track, but it is from that same album, which is really irritating because you've just nicked half of my notes already. But yeah, so the tune that I picked from that was actually the title track, Flaming Pie, which he has played live on occasion. I think less so recently. I think he definitely played it the first time I saw him in 2010, and I think it's probably on the Good Evening New York City live album DVD as well. And I just thought it had a bit of a funkiness to it, which I quite liked. It's quite a straight ahead eighth note groove all the way through. It's very sort of middle era Beatles for me. It sort of harks back to that. But you've also got this little funky piano interlude which just comes around twice, which is just a little bit of boogie woogie almost, but not to Jules Holland levels, of course. That just pops in for a couple of bars and then disappears again, which it just adds something different. And of course, it has that little offbeat guitar thing through one of the little pre-choruses as well, which is half interlude, half little bit of a guitar solo, without it being a guitar solo, which it's just a real contrast to what's otherwise kind of a very similar feel and groove, just chugging through the rest of the song. And yeah, as you said, that album was produced by George Martin and Jeff Lynne, so it's definitely got that influence on it. And I always sort of get irritated when people put down Jeff Lynne and his involvement with the Beatles, because the root thing of it is he worked with pretty much all of them. He definitely worked on loads of George Harrison stuff. He worked on this album with McCartney. He worked on an album, I think, with Ringo as well, or definitely with even on this album worked with Ringo. And at one point, I think in the 70s, John Lennon was quoted as saying his favourite song at the time was Showdown by ELO, and he used to call ELO Sons of Beatles because he liked that they were taking stuff that the Beatles had done and sort of pushing it forward a bit more. So yeah, I think Jeff Lynne was, yes, he's got his own sort of sound, but that's probably why you hire him. You hire him because you like what he's done, with whether it's with ELO or whether it's the stuff he did with Roy Orbison or Tom Petty or the Wilburys or whatever. That's his bag. That's his thing. And this album was recorded pretty much straight after the whole Real Love, Free as a Bird project and the anthology thing. So sort of having the Jeff Lynne and George Martin involvement sort of was really it must have just flowed on from them doing that. McCartney must have really liked what Jeff had done and sort of wanted him to work then on this. And as you say, it's just it's great playing all round. There isn't a ton of session players in the context of the rhythm section. There's obviously lots of string players, wind players, and all of that. And as of course, looking through the credits as we do before we talk about stuff like this, what name pops up but Snake Davis, who was on some of the tracks on that on sax, as well as I think Dave Bishop's on it as well, who's one of the great session sax players from London way. So it's just quality playing all round, and I'm sure the fact that Snake Davis's name's come up can give you a little something to talk about that may or may not be coming out very soon.
Yeah, shameless plug time. It's been cool on the new album that'll be releasing. Snake plays on one of the tracks. It's a track called Pilot, a really funky thing. Maybe that could have been our groovy pick. Maybe that'll be a groovy pick in the future.
Who knows?
That's it. Yeah, you've heard some of his playing on it, and what a player!
Yeah, I heard a snippet, but I've not heard it in context yet. So I'm excited to get the lowdown when it's all put together.
So it's me and McCartney. It's like the only stuff he does, really, isn't it?
Yeah, just from McCartney to you, that's the trajectory of a career.
Yeah.
The peak somewhere in the middle. But
so
so it's sort of nice for a nice tenuous link that we were able to make, because I think as we speak, one of the singles that by the time this will be out, should be out. It won't
Yeah.
be. It won't be the one with Snake on it, but it will be a single from you
Yeah.
and from this forthcoming album.
Yeah, and features you on drums and percussion, and yeah, you can go and check out a little snippet of it on my Facebook and Instagram of Charlie playing along, laying down some grooves on it. It's called Free Spirit, so that'll be available everywhere you get your music: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Deezer, YouTube, everywhere. You can ask Alexa. Well, I hope there's no Alexa in here.
But
Go on.
but yeah, it wouldn't be a Groovecast if we didn't finish with a slightly shameless plug on one of our
No.
behalves.
Yeah.
But it seemed only apt. And it is, yeah. I think it was we've had a pretty good rundown of McCartney's non-Beatles career.
Yeah.
In 6 tunes. So just to recap, let's just quickly fly through the 6 tunes that you, the listener, might want to go away and listen to right now. So, Ash, the obvious one,
Maybe I'm amazed.
and for me it was Band on the Run. The groovy one,
What's that you're doing?
and for me it was Let Me Roll It. And finally, the deep cut
Beautiful night.
and Flaming Pie. So yeah, go away, listen to those, and of course dive into some of the McCartney albums and the Wings albums, because I mean they're all great. They've all got
Yeah.
stuff in. I mean, particularly I think on this little episode we've discussed, it's been all about McCartney, his first solo album, and Tug of War from you, as well as Band on the Run from me, and of course Flaming Pie for both of us at the end there. So yeah, I think that was a pretty comprehensive look.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to doing another one in the future.
Yeah, maybe with Jeff Lynne at some point, because I think there's probably plenty that we could select from his, not only his ELO catalogue, but people he's collaborated with, produced for, worked with. I think that might be that might well be the next episode of this format that we put together.
For sure, yeah. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Groovecast, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.